The little black girl knocked on the trailer door as someone outside repeated her name in a chilling whisper. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's chilling tale. On a quiet night, when the stars barely peeked through the thick blanket of clouds, a small, frightened figure appeared at the doorstep of a lonely trailer. It was a little black girl, no more than 8 years old, her braids tangled and clothes dirty. Her face was streaked with tears, and her small body trembled as she knocked on the worn, weathered door with desperate force. Her heart pounded in her chest as she frantically scanned the darkness surrounding her. From the shadows, a low, eerie voice whispered her name over and over again. Maya, Maya, come out here. The words sent a chill down her spine. She looked around, wide-eyed, her breathing shallow, as if she was trying to make sense of the horrifying sound. It was not a voice she recognized, but somehow it felt wrong. It felt like danger was lurking just beyond her sight. She knocked again, faster this time, her small fist trembling. She had to get inside, away from the voice calling her name from the darkness. Maya's mind raced with fear. She didn't know who it was outside or what they wanted, but she knew she had to get away. She had to be safe. But safety was something she hadn't known in a long time. Her mother, sick and unable to wake, had left her with no one to turn to. Her father? He wasn't around. She had heard the stories. She had seen the way people whispered about her family. But none of that mattered now. She needed help. Now, she knocked once more, and finally, the door creaked open. Standing in front of her was a stranger, a tall man with a tired face. His expression softened as he looked down at the small girl, his heart heavy with concern. Hey, there, sweetheart, he said, kneeling to her level. What's going on? Why are you out here all alone? Maya blinked, unsure of what to say, her fear choking her words. She managed to whisper, They called my name. I think they're out there. The man looked confused for a moment, then followed her gaze toward the darkness outside. Nothing. No one. The night seemed calm again, but the girl's eyes said otherwise. The fear was real. Who's out there? He asked, still crouching. Maya shook her head, tears beginning to fall again. I don't know, but they called me. I need to get away. Something about her voice, the urgency in her tone, made the man stand up and look over his shoulder. He called out, his voice calm but commanding. Get inside, Maya. Stay with me. We're not letting anyone hurt you. As she stepped into the warmth of the trailer, the door closed behind her with a soft thud, and the whispering outside faded into the night. But Maya didn't feel safe yet. She had heard the whispers. She knew something was terribly wrong. And as the man closed the door, locking it behind him, he turned and looked at her with a serious expression. You're safe now, kid. We'll figure this out. Just stay close. But deep inside, he knew that the night was far from over. What had happened to Maya's family? Why was someone calling her name in the dark? And who was it that would stop at nothing to get to her? The story was only just beginning. As the door clicked shut behind them, Maya stood quietly in the small trailer, her eyes darting between the man who had let her in and the dark shadows that still loomed outside. The warmth inside the trailer felt foreign, almost suffocating after the cold dread of the night. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was still out there, waiting. The man, who had been calm and reassuring when he first spoke to her, now stood still, his eyes scanning the room before he locked the door behind him. He looked at Maya again, his face serious but kind. You're safe now, Maya. Nobody's getting to you. Maya wiped her tears with the back of her hand and nodded, but the fear still clung to her like a heavy fog. The man's expression softened, and he knelt down to her level. My name's Jack. I'm with the Iron Riders. I know this doesn't make sense right now, but I'll explain everything. Maya stared at him, not entirely sure if she could trust him yet, but there was something about his presence that made her feel just a little bit safer. Why was someone calling my name? She asked, her voice trembling. Jack took a deep breath and glanced out the window, as if considering whether to tell her the truth. Finally, he met her gaze. There's a lot you don't know, Maya. But first, I need you to stay calm, okay? We're going to figure this out. Maya nodded, though the cold fear still tightened in her chest. Jack stood up, walking toward the small kitchen area in the corner. He moved with purpose, grabbing a flashlight from the counter and flicking it on. I need you to stay here for a moment. I'm going to take a look outside. Just keep your head down, and don't open the door for anyone. Maya felt her heart race as Jack made his way to the door, but she understood. She knew there was something dangerous out there, something she couldn't explain but could feel deep in her bones. Don't worry, I'll be right back, Jack said, giving her one last reassuring look before stepping outside. The trailer door shut behind him with a soft thud. Maya was left alone in the dim light, the silence pressing in on her. She tried to focus on the quiet, but the memories of the day, the chaos at the carnival, and the eerie whisper calling her name outside the trailer kept replaying in her mind. She had no idea why this was happening to her, or why it felt like everything in her life was falling apart. As she sat there, her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps crunching outside. The trailer shook slightly as someone, or something, moved around the perimeter. Maya held her breath, straining to hear, but there was nothing. The sound stopped, and the air outside seemed to grow heavier, thicker. Moments later, she heard Jack's voice through the small window. Maya, I need you to trust me. Stay put, and don't make a sound. She jumped slightly at his sudden appearance, but Jack's face, though serious, was calm. His eyes locked with hers for a moment. Then he stepped back, scanning the area again. You're not alone in this, he muttered to himself, almost as if he were talking to the night itself. Maya didn't understand what was going on, but she could see the tension in Jack's posture, the way his eyes flicked back and forth, always alert. Who's out there? She whispered, barely able to speak through the lump in her throat. Jack turned to her. The Serpents. A gang that's been causing trouble around here for a while. I don't know why they're after you, but they don't take kindly to anyone who gets in their way. We've been trying to stay off their radar, but they don't play by the rules. Maya's heart sank as she tried to process what he was saying. The Serpents? She had never heard of them before, but she could tell by the way Jack spoke that they were dangerous. Why are they after me? She asked, her voice shaking with a mix of fear and confusion. Jack shook his head. That's what I'm trying to figure out, Maya. But for now, the best thing we can do is lay low and wait until we know more. Maya felt her eyes start to close, exhaustion overtaking her as the adrenaline from the night's events wore off. But just as she started to nod off, she heard Jack's voice again, this time more urgent. Stay awake, Maya. We need to keep you safe. Don't fall asleep just yet. She opened her eyes again, focusing on him. He wasn't trying to scare her, but the urgency in his voice made it clear that whatever was happening, it was far from over. And it was far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Jack moved swiftly to the window again, peering out into the dark night. The footsteps outside had returned. He muttered under his breath, his hand hovering near the door. They're getting closer. Stay quiet, stay low. Don't make a sound. Maya did as he instructed, her heart racing once more. The fear gripped her again, but this time, she had someone with her. Someone who was determined to protect her, no matter what. Jack's voice came again, low and steady. We're not going to let them get to you, Maya. I promise. Outside, the wind howled, the trees swaying in the darkness. The night felt endless, and the shadows seemed to stretch on forever. But inside the trailer, Maya wasn't alone. She had someone watching over her. Someone who wasn't going to let anything happen to her, no matter what it took. And that, somehow, gave her a small measure of hope. The trailer felt small and heavy as the wind howled outside. Maya sat on the couch, trying to focus on the steady hum of the old refrigerator, but her mind was far away. Jack's words still echoed in her mind. The Serpents. What kind of people would come after a little girl like her? It didn't make sense. As Jack paced in front of the window, his eyes scanning the empty dark streets, Maya's thoughts drifted to her mother. The woman who couldn't wake up, who had always promised to protect her. The woman who, now, seemed so far away. It had been days since her mother's condition had worsened, and she hadn't gotten any better. Maya had tried everything she could, but in the end, it was the bikers who were here, not a doctor. The thought made her feel even smaller. As Jack turned to face her, his expression was serious. Maya, I need you to listen closely. I'm going to get you out of here, but we have to be smart. I'll make sure you're safe, but you need to stay with me, no matter what happens. Maya nodded, her throat tight. She was so scared, but the man's calm presence made her feel like she had at least a chance of surviving. It was strange. He was a stranger, someone she'd never met before tonight. But he was the only one who had helped her when she had nowhere else to turn. She felt a strange bond with him now, one that made her believe his promises. "How are we getting out of here?" she asked quietly. Jack looked around the trailer, his eyes scanning the room like he was planning a route. "We'll go out the back way. It'll give us a few minutes before anyone notices we're gone. You just stick close to me. Don't make any noise, and we'll get through this." Maya's heart raced at the thought of leaving, but she couldn't stay here any longer. She couldn't wait for something worse to happen. "Okay," she whispered. Jack walked over to the back door and checked the lock, testing it a few times to make sure it was secure. He turned to face her one last time, giving her a small, reassuring smile. "Stay low," he said, "and keep quiet. I'll lead the way." The moment Jack opened the door, a rush of cold air hit them both. Maya shivered as she stepped out behind him, the darkness enveloping them like a thick, suffocating blanket. Jack held up his hand, signaling for her to stay close as he moved cautiously into the yard. The grass underfoot was wet and soft, but the ground was firm enough to stay quiet. They moved quickly, Jack in the lead, keeping his head on a swivel, scanning for any signs of danger. As they reached the edge of the property, Jack paused and crouched down, signaling for Maya to do the same. He peered into the distance, his eyes narrowing as he looked toward the street. There was no movement, no sign of anyone following them. But Jack knew better than to relax too soon. "We're not out of the woods yet," he murmured, his voice low. "Stay close." Maya nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. The night seemed endless, the shadows long and unforgiving. She wished she could just wake up and have it all be a bad dream. But this wasn't a dream. This was real, and the real danger was just beginning. They had to keep moving. Slowly, they crossed the yard, Jack leading the way, keeping to the shadows. The sound of their footsteps was muffled by the soft earth, but the silence around them was oppressive, as if the whole world was holding its breath. Maya felt a wave of dizziness wash over her as they moved, the exhaustion from the last few days catching up to her. Her legs were shaking, and her mind kept replaying the same terrifying image, the image of the man outside the trailer, whispering her name. It felt like something out of a horror story, but Maya knew it wasn't fiction. Jack stopped abruptly, and Maya nearly collided with him. She froze, her body stiff with fear. "What is it?" she whispered. Jack motioned for her to be quiet, his eyes scanning the area around them. In the distance, Maya could make out the faint outlines of headlights, 2 cars approaching. Jack's expression hardened. "It's them," he said softly. "We've got to move. Now." Without another word, he grabbed her hand and pulled her along, his pace quickening. Maya's heart raced as they ran, the fear escalating with every step. The headlights were getting closer, and she knew the danger was about to catch up to them. Jack's grip tightened on her hand, and she felt his urgency. They were running out of time. As they reached the end of the yard, Jack veered left, pulling Maya toward a small alleyway between 2 houses. The alley was dark, and the air smelled like damp wood and trash, but it was their best chance. Jack glanced back one last time, then motioned for her to follow. "Keep up, Maya," he urged, his voice calm but firm. Maya pushed herself harder, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. She could hear the engines of the cars now, their sound growing louder. They were close. Jack led her through the alley, staying just ahead, his eyes focused on the path in front of them. The sound of footsteps behind them echoed in the night, but Jack never faltered. He kept moving, determined to get them to safety. Maya felt her legs begin to burn, the exhaustion threatening to overtake her, but she pushed through. She had to keep going. She had to survive. Jack stopped abruptly at the end of the alley, his hand shooting up to signal for her to stop. He turned to face her, his expression grim. "We need to get to the main road. There's a truck coming to get us. Stay quiet, stay close, and don't make a sound." Maya nodded, her heart thumping wildly in her chest. They were so close now, so close to being free. But the night wasn't over yet, and the real fight was just beginning. They moved quickly, their footsteps light against the damp ground, but Maya could hear the faint sound of engines growing louder behind them. Jack's grip on her hand tightened, and his pace quickened as they reached the end of the alley. They had to get to the main road. It was their only chance. As they stepped into the small street, Jack motioned for Maya to stay close to him. The headlights were now visible in the distance, cutting through the night like a beacon. "Stay quiet, Maya," Jack whispered, his voice low and urgent. Maya nodded, trying to slow her breathing, trying to keep her fear from overwhelming her. She had no idea what was coming next, but she trusted Jack. He had been her protector since that moment when she had knocked on the trailer door. They didn't have much time left. The cars were closer now, and the sound of their engines sent a chill through Maya's bones. Jack glanced over his shoulder to make sure they hadn't been spotted, and then he pulled Maya toward a small, narrow side street, hoping to avoid the oncoming vehicles. The two of them moved quickly, but Jack's pace was steady and controlled. He had been through this kind of thing before. Maya could tell. He was a man who didn't panic, a man who knew how to handle himself. Maya followed him as closely as she could, but her legs felt like they were made of lead. Every step she took felt heavier than the last. She was exhausted, both physically and mentally, but she couldn't stop. She couldn't give up. The faint sound of the vehicles behind them grew louder, and Maya could hear voices now, distant but clear, shouting in frustration. She looked up at Jack, her heart racing. "Are they following us?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack didn't answer right away. He just kept moving, his eyes scanning the area around them. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and steady. "Yes," he said, "but we're not going to let them catch us." They turned the corner and into another alley, Jack pulling Maya along with him. The alley was even darker than the last, and the shadows seemed to stretch longer, making it hard to see anything beyond a few feet. Maya's heart pounded in her chest as they moved deeper into the darkness. The sound of the cars behind them had stopped, and for a moment, she dared to believe they had lost them. But Jack didn't stop. He kept moving, his eyes sharp, his senses on high alert. "We're almost there," he murmured. Maya didn't understand what he meant, but she trusted him. She had to. They moved through the alley quickly, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the still night. Maya's mind raced. Who were these people chasing them? Why were they so determined to find her? Jack seemed to know. Something she didn't, but he wasn't telling her everything. As they reached the end of the alley, Jack stopped abruptly, his hand lifting to signal for Maya to stay silent. He peered around the corner, his face tense, his eyes darting back and forth. Maya stood frozen beside him, her heart racing as she tried to see what he was looking at. Finally, Jack turned to her. "Stay behind me," he whispered. "Do not move unless I tell you to." Maya nodded, her throat tight with fear. She had no idea what was going on, but she knew one thing for sure. Jack wasn't going to let anything happen to her. As they stepped into the clearing, Jack led Maya toward an old, beat-up truck parked on the side of the road. It was their escape, their ticket to safety. The headlights of the cars that had been following them were now visible again, much closer than before. Jack moved quickly, pulling Maya toward the truck. He yanked open the door and gestured for Maya to get inside. "Hurry," he urged. Maya climbed into the passenger seat, her heart still racing, her mind spinning with confusion. Jack slammed the door behind her and ran around to the driver's side, jumping into the truck. He started the engine with a roar, and the truck lurched forward, pulling away from the curb. The sound of the engines behind them grew louder again, but this time, Jack didn't hesitate. He floored the gas pedal, the truck screeching as it shot down the road. Maya glanced over her shoulder, her breath catching in her throat as she saw the dark shapes of the vehicles chasing them, but they were far behind. For now, they were safe. The truck bounced over the uneven road, its tires kicking up dust and gravel. Maya held on tight to the seat, her heart still pounding in her chest. She had no idea where Jack was taking her, but right now, she didn't care. She just wanted to get away from the danger. She wanted to be safe. Jack's voice broke through the tension in the truck. "We're going to lay low for a while. Stay quiet, stay down. Don't let anyone see you." Maya nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She didn't know what was coming next, but she had to trust Jack. He was the only one who had been there for her, the only one who had helped when no one else would. As the truck sped through the night, Maya tried to steady her breathing. Her mind was a whirlwind of questions, but she couldn't ask them now. She had to stay focused. She had to stay alive. Jack's grip on the wheel tightened as he made a sharp turn onto a dirt road. The truck bounced wildly as they left the main road behind, and Maya's heart skipped a beat. They were truly alone now. The world outside the truck was dark and silent, and for a brief moment, Maya allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they were safe. But deep down, she knew this was just the beginning. The real fight had only just begun. The truck rumbled down the narrow dirt road, the headlights cutting through the darkness like a knife. Maya sat low in her seat, trying to steady her breathing, but the tension in the air was thick. She could hear the tires crunching over the gravel, and the low hum of the engine as Jack focused on the road ahead. His eyes were sharp, scanning every corner of the forest that surrounded them. Maya could feel the unease in the truck. The last few hours had been a blur. Jack had gotten them out of danger for now, but she knew they weren't safe yet. Not really. The night still held 1,000 unknowns. Jack's voice broke the silence. "We're almost there," he said quietly, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. Maya glanced up, but all she could see were the shadows outside, the trees bending and swaying in the wind. Her heart raced as she thought about the serpents. Why were they after her? What did they want? Jack had said they didn't play by the rules, but that only made her more terrified. Who were they, really? She had heard stories about gangs and violence, but this felt different. The way the man had whispered her name outside the trailer, there was something so personal about it, so terrifying. "Where are we going?" Maya asked, her voice barely audible. Jack didn't answer right away. He just kept driving, the headlights illuminating the road ahead. After a few moments, he spoke again, his voice calm but firm. "To a safe place. I'm going to get you out of this, Maya. Just stay with me, okay? We're almost there." Maya nodded, though doubt still lingered in her chest. She had never felt this kind of fear before. She had never been so far from home, so far from the only life she had ever known. The truck crept along the road, its engine humming softly in the quiet night. Maya could see the outline of a cabin up ahead, nestled in the trees. It was small, isolated, and barely visible from the road. This was the place Jack had mentioned. This was where they would be safe, at least for now. Jack turned the truck onto a small gravel driveway, the tires crunching beneath them. He stopped the truck in front of the cabin and killed the engine. The night was eerily quiet now, the only sound the rustling of the leaves in the wind. "Stay close," Jack said as he opened the door. "I'll make sure everything's clear." Maya didn't say anything as she climbed out of the truck. Her legs were unsteady, her body still shaken from the events of the night, but she followed Jack's lead as he walked toward the cabin. She felt small, vulnerable, as she crossed the threshold of the cabin, stepping into the darkness. The door creaked behind them as Jack pushed it open, and Maya's eyes adjusted to the dim light inside. The room was sparse but functional, with just a few pieces of furniture. There was a small table, a couple of chairs, and a worn couch in the corner. Maya's gaze shifted around the room, but her mind kept returning to the night outside. The fear was still there, gnawing at her. "Is it safe here?" she asked. Jack turned to face her, his eyes soft but serious. "For now," he said. "This place isn't much, but it'll keep you hidden. We just need to lay low for a while." Maya nodded, though she couldn't shake the feeling that they hadn't outrun the danger. It wasn't just the serpents she feared. It was the unknown. "I don't want to go back there," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't want to be anywhere near that man again." Jack's expression hardened. "You won't be. We're going to keep you safe, Maya. I won't let anything happen to you." The intensity in his voice was comforting, but the weight of the situation still pressed down on Maya's chest. She didn't know what was waiting for her outside the walls of the cabin. What if the serpents found them? What if they weren't safe here either? Jack seemed to sense her unease. He walked over to the table and grabbed a chair, pulling it out and sitting down. "Listen," he said, his voice low. "I know you're scared. Hell, I'm scared too. But we're going to figure this out. We're not alone in this." Maya looked at him, still not sure how to trust anyone, especially someone who had only just shown up in her life. "How can you be sure?" she asked. "How do you know they won't find us?" Jack sighed, rubbing his hand over his face. "I don't know for sure, Maya. But I know how to handle myself, and I know how to keep you safe. I've been in situations like this before. I've fought for people before, and I'm not going to stop now. You're going to be okay. I'll make sure of it." Maya looked at him, seeing something in his eyes, something that made her want to believe him. For the first time since she'd knocked on that trailer door, she felt like there was a chance. A small one, but a chance. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." She wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, or what the next hour would bring. But for now, she was here. And Jack was keeping her safe. It wasn't much, but it was enough for tonight. The wind howled outside the cabin, and the night pressed in around them, but Maya felt a small flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they had a chance to survive this. Jack stood up, his movements calm and deliberate as he walked over to the door, checking the locks one more time. "We're safe for now," he said, turning to face her. "But don't forget, we're not out of the woods yet. We've still got work to do." Maya nodded, her heart still heavy but not as afraid. The night wasn't over, but maybe, just maybe, they were finally on the right track. The morning light crept through the trees, casting long shadows across the cabin's small front yard. Maya awoke with a start, the lingering effects of the nightmare she had dreamed of the night before still clinging to her mind. She had been running, the sound of something, chasing her through the darkness, the whisper of her name growing louder and louder until it was deafening. She bolted upright, her heart pounding in her chest, but then she realized where she was. The cabin. Jack was sitting at the table, cleaning his gear, his eyes alert, always watching. The stillness of the morning felt different now, quieter. For a moment, Maya almost believed that maybe, just maybe, the danger was finally over. But Jack's somber expression reminded her that they were far from safe. He didn't speak as she sat up and rubbed her eyes, but his eyes met hers with a certain understanding. She could see the exhaustion in his face, too, even if he tried to hide it. "Did you sleep okay?" he asked, his voice low. Maya nodded, though she wasn't sure if it had been sleep at all. It was more like a series of fragmented dreams, the kind that left you feeling like you hadn't rested at all. "As good as I could," she replied, still unsure of how to trust the calm. Jack gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, and stood up, stretching his stiff muscles. "We need to move out soon. The longer we stay here, the more likely it is they'll find us. I need to make sure you're safe." Maya didn't respond right away. She was still processing everything, still trying to piece together why all of this was happening to her. Why had the serpents come after her? She had no answers, only more questions. And the more she thought about it, the more she realized how little she actually knew about the people chasing them, about the things that had happened before she had even known Jack. "Where are we going?" she asked, finally breaking the silence. Jack didn't hesitate. "We've got a safe house a few miles from here. It's a place that's off the grid. No one knows about it. We'll stay there until we can figure out what the hell is going on and how to keep you safe." The idea of moving again made Maya's stomach tighten. She didn't want to run anymore. She didn't want to keep living like this, constantly looking over her shoulder, afraid of what might be lurking in the shadows. But she knew Jack was right. The longer they stayed, the more danger they would be in. "Okay," she said quietly. Jack turned away and grabbed his jacket, his movements efficient, practiced. He didn't say anything else, but the message was clear. There was no time to waste. Maya stood up slowly, her legs still a bit stiff from the long hours they had spent on the road. She moved to the small window and peered out, trying to catch a glimpse of the road that Jack had taken them down the night before. The sun was rising higher now, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, but the world outside still felt far too quiet. "You ready?" Jack's voice broke through her thoughts, and she turned to see him standing by the door, his hand resting on the knob. She nodded, forcing herself to take a deep breath. "I'm ready." Jack opened the door, and the cool morning air rushed in, carrying with it the scent of pine and earth. Maya stepped outside, her heart beating faster as they left the relative safety of the cabin behind. She was already beginning to feel the weight of the unknown again, but she didn't have much choice. Jack had promised to keep her safe, and right now, that was the only thing she had left to hold on to. They walked in silence, Jack leading the way, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. Maya kept close, not daring to fall behind. They reached the edge of the clearing and followed a narrow path that led into the trees. The woods were dense, the branches thick with leaves, but Jack seemed to know exactly where he was going. As they walked, Maya couldn't help but wonder how Jack had gotten involved in all of this. He had said he'd been in similar situations before, but he hadn't told her much more than that. He was keeping something from her. She could feel it, but she didn't ask. She didn't want to push him. She needed him to trust her first. After a few minutes, they emerged from the trees and came to a small, rusted gate that marked the entrance to a secluded property. The house was small, hidden from view, nestled behind a dense line of bushes. It looked abandoned, worn down, but there was something comforting about it, like it was a place forgotten by time. Jack turned to Maya and gave her a brief, reassuring smile. "This is it," he said. Maya nodded, still unsure of what to expect. She followed him up to the door, but just as Jack reached for the handle, a distant sound caught their attention. The sound of an engine. Maya's stomach dropped. She looked around, but there was no place to hide. "We're not alone," Jack muttered under his breath, his voice tense. Without another word, he grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the back of the house. Maya's heart raced, her mind spinning. Who was it? Had they been followed? She looked over her shoulder, but the sound of the engine was growing louder, coming closer. Jack moved fast, pushing her toward a small shed at the back of the house. "Stay quiet," he whispered. Maya didn't argue. She just stayed close, her breathing shallow as they crouched behind the shed. Jack's hand was tight on her arm, his body tense, alert. He was waiting, watching. They both listened in silence, the engine getting closer and closer. Then it stopped. Everything went still. "Stay here," Jack said, his voice calm but firm. "I'll check it out." Maya nodded, her eyes wide, her body trembling. She stayed hidden behind the shed, her heart pounding as she waited for Jack's return. Time seemed to stretch out in the silence. The seconds felt like hours, and the only sound was the beating of her own heart in her chest. Finally, Jack's figure emerged from the shadows, his face grim. He didn't say anything as he approached her, his eyes scanning the area once more. "It's the serpents," he said quietly, his voice low with anger. "They found us." The silence between them was suffocating as Jack pulled Maya closer, his eyes darting around, his grip tight and protective. The sound of the serpent's engine had stopped, but Jack knew better than to think they were gone. Every instinct screamed at him to act quickly. He needed to get them out of there, but they couldn't run blindly. The serpents were close, and Jack had no intention of letting them get any closer to Maya. The stakes had just gotten higher. "Maya," he whispered, his voice firm, "I need you to stay behind me. Stay low and move when I tell you. Don't make a sound." Maya nodded, her heart hammering in her chest. She could feel the weight of Jack's words pressing on her. She knew they were no longer just trying to escape. Now, it was about survival. Jack's hand tightened around hers as he led her toward the back door of the small shed, where the sound of footsteps could be heard approaching. They were getting closer, and Jack's mind raced as he weighed his options. The serpents were closing in, but they still had a chance to make it out. They just needed to stay calm. He motioned for Maya to stay still and listen. The footsteps stopped just outside the shed. Jack held his breath, waiting for the sound to move away. But instead, he heard the creak of the shed's door. "Stay quiet," Jack hissed under his breath, crouching low to the ground. Maya squeezed his hand, her pulse quickening as they both listened to the heavy footsteps on the other side. Jack's eyes narrowed, focusing on the slightest movements outside the shed. He could see the silhouette of a man through the cracks in the walls. The serpents were searching the area, and he knew they had to act fast. "I'm going to draw them away," Jack whispered, pulling a small object from his jacket pocket. He quickly flicked a switch, and a bright flash of light pierced the night, distracting the serpent standing outside. The man cursed under his breath, stumbling back, and Jack seized the moment. "Now, Maya, move," he ordered, as he darted toward the back of the shed. Maya followed, her feet light on the dirt path, but her heart heavy with fear. They raced down the narrow alleyway, Jack pulling her along with urgency. The sound of footsteps echoed behind them as the serpents realized they had been tricked. Jack pushed forward, his eyes scanning the area, searching for a way out. "Keep going," he urged, not daring to look back. They were close now, closer than ever to escaping the immediate danger, but Jack knew they couldn't stop running until they were far away. Maya's breath came in short, sharp gasps as they sprinted toward the edge of the woods. The trees loomed ahead like dark sentinels, but there was no time to hesitate. Jack's mind raced, his hands still gripping Maya's, keeping her close as they tore through the underbrush. A shout from behind made Jack's heart skip a beat. They were being followed. Jack cursed under his breath. "We need to lose them. Now." He pulled Maya deeper into the forest, the dense trees and foliage providing some cover, but not enough to keep them hidden for long. The sound of pursuit was growing louder. The serpents were gaining on them. "This way," Jack barked, dragging Maya toward a thick cluster of trees. They had to double back, confuse their pursuers. Jack wasn't sure how long they could keep this up, but they couldn't let the serpents find them. The woods seemed to stretch on forever, and the sound of their pursuers' footsteps began to fade. Jack glanced over at Maya. "We're almost there," he said through clenched teeth. But just as the words left his mouth, the distant rumble of engines echoed through the trees. They weren't alone anymore. Jack's mind raced. They had to get off the road. He turned to Maya, urgency in his eyes. "Stay close, Maya," he ordered, pulling her toward a rocky outcrop that jutted out from the forest floor. They crouched behind it, panting, as the sound of the engines grew louder, then stopped. The trees ahead shook as headlights illuminated the area. They were closing in on their position. Jack's grip tightened around his gun as he waited for the serpents to pass. Maya huddled beside him, her body trembling, but she didn't say a word. She knew this wasn't over. The danger was still there, just out of sight. As the trucks moved past, Jack's mind raced with possibilities. He knew they couldn't wait much longer. "Get ready," he whispered, as the trucks finally passed. The sound of their engines faded into the distance, but Jack didn't relax. The serpents could circle back at any moment. They needed to keep moving. He glanced down at Maya. "We're going to make it, I promise." Maya looked up at him, her face pale but determined. "I trust you, Jack," she said quietly, the words heavy in the air between them. Jack nodded, his expression hardening. "Let's go." They moved quickly, Jack leading the way through the forest, keeping to the shadows. The air was thick with tension, but Jack knew they had to stay ahead of the serpents if they had any hope of making it out of this alive. Every sound, every movement, was amplified in the silence. But with Maya at his side, Jack wasn't about to let anything happen to her. They would make it through this. Together. The night felt like it would never end as Jack and Maya kept moving through the dense forest, the only sounds being their hurried footsteps and the distant calls of night creatures. The adrenaline was wearing off, and exhaustion was starting to set in, but Jack couldn't afford to slow down. Maya's breath was shallow as she tried to keep up, her body still trembling from the fear and the uncertainty of the last few hours. The woods felt endless, the dark trees towering above them like silent watchers. How much further? Maya's voice broke the silence, soft but full of worry. Jack glanced back at her, his face hard with determination. "We're almost there," he said, though he wasn't entirely sure if that was true. They had to keep moving. The sound of engines had faded some time ago, but Jack knew the serpents wouldn't stop searching for them. They were persistent, ruthless. He could feel it in his gut. They were never really safe. Not yet. Jack pushed forward, scanning the trees ahead for any signs of danger. "Stay close," he whispered, pulling her a little closer to his side as they moved deeper into the woods. Maya nodded, her eyes wide, looking over her shoulder constantly, like she was expecting someone to leap out from the shadows. The fear in her eyes was palpable, and Jack hated it. He hated that she had to go through this, that she had to live like this. But he had made a promise, and he wasn't going to let anything happen to her. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a small clearing. The moonlight filtered down through the trees, casting a faint glow on the ground. Jack held up a hand, signaling for Maya to stop. She froze, her chest rising and falling quickly, her body on edge. "What is it?" she whispered. Jack didn't answer right away. He was listening, his eyes scanning the clearing for any movement. The air was still, too still. The hair on the back of his neck stood up as he noticed something in the distance, a faint light flickering through the trees. It was moving. He knew exactly what it was. Another vehicle. The serpents had found them. "Move," Jack hissed, grabbing Maya's arm and pulling her toward the dense brush at the edge of the clearing. They had to get out of sight, now. Maya's heart pounded in her chest as she followed Jack through the thick underbrush. The sounds of the night had shifted, replaced by the sound of footsteps on the ground behind them. The serpents were close, and Jack could hear their voices now, low and urgent. They were searching, calling out to one another. Jack cursed under his breath, pushing Maya ahead of him. "We need to keep moving," he said, his voice sharp. "We can't let them catch us." Maya nodded, her face pale with fear. They were running out of time. Jack could hear the engines of the vehicles growing louder as they approached the clearing. He pushed Maya harder, urging her to keep up as they ducked behind a large rock, hiding in the shadows. Jack's heart was racing, every muscle in his body tense as he listened to the voices getting closer. He couldn't let them find them here. He wouldn't let anything happen to Maya. The sounds of the serpent's search party passed just feet away from their hiding spot. Jack could feel his pulse in his ears, the tension unbearable. He didn't dare to move a muscle. If they were discovered now, there would be no escape. He glanced at Maya, her face barely visible in the darkness, her eyes wide with fear but focused. She was still with him. They were still alive. After what felt like an eternity, the voices of the serpents faded into the distance. Jack waited, counting each second, listening for any sign of movement. When he was sure they were gone, he slowly exhaled, his body relaxing for the first time in hours. But they weren't out of the woods yet. "We need to get to the truck," Jack whispered, his voice urgent again. Maya nodded, still too scared to speak. Jack pulled her along, staying close to the ground as they made their way through the woods. The truck was their only chance, but it was still a mile or more away. They had to stay quiet, stay out of sight, but Jack knew time was running out. The serpents would circle back sooner or later. He didn't want to think about what would happen if they caught up with them. As they reached the edge of the woods, Jack looked out over the open field that stretched before them. The truck was parked just beyond the tree line, its headlights dim but visible. They weren't far now. Jack motioned for Maya to stay low as they moved toward the truck, every step measured, every sound amplified in the silence of the night. Jack felt a familiar tension building in his chest. They had to get to the truck without being seen. He was about to make his move when he heard something. A twig snapping underfoot, the unmistakable sound of someone approaching. Jack froze, his eyes wide with fear. He looked at Maya, who had already stopped moving, her eyes locked on the shadows ahead. Someone was coming. The air felt heavy again. Jack's mind raced. This was it. They couldn't outrun them anymore. The serpents were closing in. There was no way out but to face them head on. "Get ready," Jack whispered. He knew what he had to do. He wasn't about to let anyone hurt Maya. Not now, not ever. The sound of footsteps grew louder, and Jack's pulse quickened. He turned his head slightly, just enough to see the shadows moving in the distance. The serpents were getting closer, their voices low and menacing, and Jack knew they had no time left. His eyes met Maya's, and for a split second, everything seemed to freeze. They were so close to the truck, to safety, but the odds were slipping away. Jack's instincts kicked in. He had trained for situations like this, but nothing could prepare him for the fear that now gripped him as he watched the shapes moving through the darkness. He could hear the crunch of their boots on the dry leaves and dirt, and every second felt like a lifetime. "Stay down," Jack whispered urgently, pulling Maya behind a thick tree, hiding them from view. He moved with precision, guiding her as quietly as possible. Maya nodded, her eyes wide, every muscle in her body taut with fear. She could feel her heart racing, beating loudly in her chest, but she knew she had to stay close to Jack. They had no other choice. The voices of the serpents came closer, but Jack didn't move. He stayed perfectly still, listening, waiting. A figure passed just a few feet from where they were hiding, and Jack held his breath, praying they wouldn't be seen. The man was tall, wearing a dark leather jacket and a skull cap. He scanned the area briefly but didn't stop. Jack barely exhaled, his hand still tight on Maya's arm. They were running out of time. Jack slowly began to backtrack, pulling Maya with him as quietly as possible. They needed to get to the truck. As they crept forward, Jack's mind was working at full speed. He could hear the serpents talking among themselves now, their voices getting louder as they circled the area. They weren't giving up. Jack had to make a move, and it had to be fast. The truck was only a few yards away, but it felt like miles with the danger so close. "Stay with me, Maya," Jack said quietly, his voice low but firm. He could feel her anxiety, her fear. But there was no time for comfort now. "When I say go, we run. Fast." Maya nodded, her body stiff, her breathing shallow. She could hear her heart pounding in her ears, louder than the footsteps of the serpents. Jack was moving again, more quickly now, pulling her through the dark underbrush toward the truck. They were almost there when Jack's foot hit a rock. The sound was small, but it felt like an explosion in the quiet night. Maya froze, her breath caught in her throat. The serpents were too close now. One of them turned, his gaze sweeping the area. Jack's heart raced as he saw the man's eyes lock on their position. "Go!" Jack shouted, his voice a harsh whisper. Without thinking, Maya bolted forward, running faster than she had ever run in her life. The truck was only a few steps away now, and Jack was right behind her, his heart in his throat. They reached the truck, and Jack quickly shoved Maya into the passenger seat, slamming the door shut as he jumped into the driver's side. The sound of their footsteps was getting louder, but Jack didn't hesitate. He turned the key in the ignition, and the truck roared to life. The tires screeched as Jack floored the gas pedal, sending the truck barreling down the dirt road. Behind them, the serpents had realized they were escaping. Shouts echoed in the night as the vehicles revved to life, but Jack didn't look back. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, and his eyes stayed focused on the road ahead. "Hold on," Jack shouted over the sound of the engine. Maya's eyes were wide with fear, but she nodded, her hands gripping the seat as the truck bounced over the uneven road. They had made it this far. Now, they just had to keep going. The truck kicked up dust as it careened down the road, and Jack pushed the pedal to the floor, urging it faster. The trees blurred around them, but Jack knew they couldn't afford to slow down. Maya turned to look out the back window, her heart in her throat as she saw the headlights of the serpents' cars behind them. They were gaining on them. "They're catching up," Maya said, her voice tight with panic. Jack's jaw clenched, his eyes narrowed. "Not for long," he said, determination in his voice. He swerved sharply, veering off the road, and onto a narrow dirt path that wound through the trees. The truck's tires kicked up a cloud of dust, but Jack kept his focus, his eyes darting between the trees ahead. The serpents were still on their tail, but Jack had something the others didn't, a clear path. The truck rocked and bumped as they flew down the path, but Jack didn't slow. Maya grabbed onto the door handle, her eyes glued to the road, watching for any sign of movement. Behind them, the sound of the serpents' vehicles was starting to fade, but it wasn't over yet. Jack knew they had to get out of the woods, get to higher ground. "Stay down," he said again, his voice low. Maya didn't need to be told twice. She crouched lower in her seat, her body pressed against the truck's side. Jack could see the opening ahead, a clearing in the woods that led to a highway. If they could just make it there, they might lose the serpents for good. He pushed the truck harder, the engine roaring as they neared the edge of the forest. The clearing was just ahead. Jack's heart was in his throat as he saw the highway in the distance, the road that could take them to safety. But just as they reached the edge of the trees, something unexpected happened. A flash of headlights appeared in the distance, and Jack's eyes widened as he saw a car barreling down the road, heading straight for them. His heart skipped a beat. They weren't alone, and the danger wasn't over. Not yet. The headlights grew brighter as they barreled down the narrow road, closing in on Jack and Maya. The sound of the engine grew louder, a relentless force that seemed to shake the air around them. Jack's heart raced, his mind calculating their chances, but there was no time for calculations now. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, pushing the truck faster. The clearing was just ahead, but the approaching car was an obstacle they couldn't afford to meet head-on. Jack swerved sharply to the left, narrowly avoiding the other vehicle, the truck's tires skidding against the rough dirt path. Maya's breath hitched in her chest, her hand flying to the door handle as the truck careened through the trees, its wheels screeching on the loose gravel. She glanced out the side mirror, her stomach lurching as she saw the car still following them, its headlights cutting through the night like a pair of vengeful eyes. Jack's grip on the wheel was unshakable, his focus razor-sharp. The road ahead twisted, but he knew he had to keep pushing. He couldn't afford to let them catch up. "Hold on," Jack shouted, his voice full of urgency. Maya did as he said, holding onto the seat with both hands, her heart in her throat. She could feel the truck's engine roaring, the speed increasing, but the serpents were still behind them. They were relentless. Jack's eyes flicked from the road ahead to the rearview mirror. The headlights of the pursuing car were still visible, too close for comfort. They had to make it to the main highway, where the truck's speed could finally give them an edge. He slammed his foot down harder on the accelerator, the truck jolting forward as it hit a steep incline. The road ahead was a blur, and Jack's knuckles whitened as he fought to keep the truck steady. Almost there, Jack muttered to himself, though his mind was clouded with doubt. Could they make it in time? Could they lose the serpents? As they reached the edge of the forest, Jack saw the highway in the distance, just beyond a small rise. They were close, so close, but the serpents weren't giving up. The car behind them surged forward, its engine roaring louder as it caught up. Jack's heart pounded in his chest. The highway was just ahead, but the road leading to it was a narrow, winding path. There was no room for mistakes now. Jack swerved again, taking the curve at breakneck speed, his eyes locked on the road. He could hear the other vehicle gaining ground, the tires screeching as the serpents made their move. Come on! Come on! Jack muttered under his breath, his jaw clenched. The truck's headlights illuminated the entrance to the highway. They were nearly there. But just as Jack thought they had a chance to break free, the car behind them pulled up alongside the truck. Maya's breath caught in her throat as she saw the figure in the other vehicle, a dark silhouette leaning out the window, gun raised. Jack's eyes locked onto the barrel of the gun as the shot rang out, the deafening crack echoing through the night. The bullet missed them by inches, but it didn't matter. The danger was too close. Jack swerved to the right, sending the truck veering off the road and into the brush. The truck's tires bounced over the uneven terrain, but Jack kept his foot firmly on the gas. "We have to get to the highway," he shouted. Maya's pulse raced as she looked out the window, her eyes darting between the approaching vehicle and the narrow gap ahead. The highway was their only chance, and they couldn't afford to lose it. Jack kept pushing the truck forward, his eyes scanning for the opening they needed. The ground beneath them shook as they hit a small ditch, but Jack didn't slow. The truck flew over it, the tires squealing as they hit the dirt path again. Maya clenched her teeth, her heart in her throat, but she didn't let go of her seat. Jack's determination was infectious, and for the first time since they had started running, Maya felt a flicker of hope. They could make it. They had to. The truck raced toward the highway, the lights of the pursuing car now a distant glow behind them. Jack turned the wheel sharply, veering onto the main road. The moment the truck hit the asphalt, it was like they had gained a new lease on life. The road was wider, smoother, and the truck could finally pick up speed. Maya looked over at Jack, her chest still tight with fear but filled with a strange sense of relief. Jack's face was set in determination, but there was something else in his eyes, something soft, like he was giving her the space to breathe. For the first time in hours, she didn't feel the suffocating pressure of the chase. They were free, at least for now. Jack slammed his foot on the accelerator, pushing the truck faster, but he didn't speak. Maya knew there was more to come. They had made it to the highway, but the serpents would be back. Jack wouldn't stop until they were safe, but Maya wasn't sure what that would take. As the truck roared down the road, the lights of the city up ahead seemed to promise safety. Maya turned to look out the window, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Not yet. The truck sped on, the engine's roar filling the silence, and for a moment, Maya dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, they would make it out alive. The truck continued to speed down the highway, the engine roaring as Jack pushed the pedal further, but Maya's heart still raced with fear. They had managed to escape, but the fear of what was waiting for them still lingered. She glanced over at Jack, whose jaw was clenched, his eyes locked on the road ahead. He hadn't said anything for a while, but Maya could feel the tension in the air. They were far from safe. She could see the city lights in the distance, but the road ahead was still full of uncertainty. They had lost the serpents for now, but Maya knew better than to think they were free. They would come back for her, and they wouldn't stop until they got what they wanted. Maya wiped her face, trying to clear the sweat and the fear, but the thought of the serpents chasing them, of what they might do next, still had her gripped with terror. She turned her eyes toward the horizon, watching as the city grew closer. It was almost a relief to see the lights, but it was also a reminder of how little time they had. The truck's tires hummed against the pavement, and the city skyline loomed ahead, but Jack didn't slow down. He had his foot firmly on the gas, his focus unwavering. He wasn't about to stop now. "Where are we going?" Maya asked quietly, her voice hoarse from all the running and fear. Jack didn't answer immediately. His eyes flickered over to her for a brief moment before turning back to the road. "We need to get to a safe house," he said, his voice low. "A place where we can regroup. They won't know where to find us there." Maya nodded, but the unease still gnawed at her. She wasn't sure what to believe anymore. She had trusted Jack to keep her safe, and he had, but now the stakes were higher. The serpents wouldn't stop. They would keep coming. "Do you think they're still following us?" Maya asked, her voice shaking. Jack glanced over at her briefly. "I don't know," he said, his tone grim. "But I'm not taking any chances." Maya swallowed, her throat tight. The city lights were getting brighter now, but the closer they got, the more her anxiety grew. There was no place she could run where they wouldn't find her. The serpents would always be out there. Do you ever think it will end? Maya asked, her voice barely a whisper. Jack's grip on the steering wheel tightened. He didn't answer right away. He didn't need to. Maya could feel the weight of his silence. He didn't know either. They couldn't run forever. They had to face the danger eventually. The truck continued its relentless journey toward the city, and Maya sat back in her seat, her body trembling. She couldn't stop thinking about what the serpents would do if they caught up with them again. She thought about her mom, still back at the trailer, and all the things that had happened in the past few days that had led them here. How had things gotten so bad? How had she ended up here, on the run with a stranger, not knowing what would happen next? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of Jack's voice. We're almost there, he said, glancing at her with a faint, reassuring smile. But Maya could see the exhaustion in his eyes. He had been through a lot too, and even though he was trying to stay calm, she knew he was just as scared as she was. The truck slowed as they reached the edge of the city, the streetlights illuminating their path. Jack turned onto a quieter street, away from the main traffic. They drove for several more blocks, the buildings growing taller, the noise of the city becoming more distant. Jack eventually pulled into a parking lot behind a small, nondescript building. This is it, he said, cutting the engine. Maya looked around, her eyes scanning the area. It looked like a rundown building, nothing special, but there was something about it that made her feel a little safer, a little more secure. She wasn't sure why. Maybe it was because she was finally starting to feel like they had some control over their situation. You sure about this? Maya asked, her voice trembling again. Jack gave her a small, reassuring smile. It's the best we can do right now, he said. We need to stay off the grid for a while. He got out of the truck and came around to open Maya's door. She hesitated for a moment before stepping out, her legs still shaky. Jack led her toward the door of the building, keeping a close eye on their surroundings. The door creaked as he opened it, and they stepped into the dimly lit hallway. Maya followed Jack down the narrow corridor, her footsteps echoing in the silence. The building smelled old, like dust and forgotten memories. It felt strange to be inside, but at the same time, it was better than being out in the open, running for their lives. They reached a small door at the end of the hallway. Jack opened it and gestured for Maya to go inside. Stay here, he said softly. I'll keep watch. Maya nodded, stepping inside. The room was small but functional. There was a bed in the corner, a table, and a few chairs scattered around the space. It was better than nothing. She sat on the bed, her mind still racing with thoughts of what had happened, what was still to come. Jack closed the door behind him, and Maya could hear him moving around outside, making sure everything was secure. For the first time in what felt like forever, she let herself relax, just a little. But even as she closed her eyes, the thought of the serpents loomed in her mind. This was only a temporary reprieve. The real battle was just beginning. The room felt like a prison, but it was the safest place Maya had been in what felt like forever. She sat on the edge of the bed, her eyes darting around the dimly lit room, trying to process everything that had happened. Jack had secured the building as best as he could, but Maya knew that they weren't safe. Not really. They had bought themselves some time, but the serpents were relentless. It wasn't a matter of if they would find them, it was a matter of when. The silence of the room was only broken by the distant hum of traffic outside, a reminder that they were still in the city, still surrounded by the dangers they couldn't outrun. Maya rubbed her hands together nervously, trying to shake off the chill that had settled in her bones. She kept replaying the last few hours in her mind, the truck speeding through the night, the serpents closing in, the bullet that had narrowly missed them. It all felt like a blur, too much to process, but the fear was real. Maya thought about her mother, still back at the trailer, and a wave of guilt washed over her. She had left, but she didn't want to leave her mom behind. She hadn't wanted to leave her life behind. But she had no choice. Jack had kept his promise to protect her, but it wasn't just about keeping her safe anymore. It was about surviving. It was about figuring out how to end this nightmare. A soft knock on the door pulled Maya from her thoughts. She looked up, her heart racing, but it was Jack. He stepped in quietly, closing the door behind him. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, looking at her with those intense, guarded eyes. Maya saw the fatigue in his face. He hadn't gotten any rest either. They had been running for hours. How's the situation? Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack looked at her, his jaw tight, his eyes scanning the room as if he was already planning their next move. It's quiet for now. I checked the perimeter again. No sign of anyone yet. His words were meant to reassure her, but Maya could see the tension in his posture. He didn't believe it was over, and neither did she. She nodded, her eyes drifting to the window, the faint glow of city lights casting long shadows across the floor. What now? Maya asked, her voice trembling slightly. Jack walked over to the small table and sat down, leaning forward, his elbows resting on his knees. He didn't answer immediately. It was clear he was weighing his options. We wait, but not for long. We can't stay here forever. Maya looked at him, her heart sinking. How much longer can we keep running? Jack met her gaze, his eyes filled with a mixture of determination and concern. As long as it takes, he said, his voice steady. I'm not going to let them get you, Maya. But we need a plan. We need to find out who they are, why they're after you, and what they want. Maya swallowed hard, her throat tight with the fear that she couldn't shake. I don't know what they want. I don't even know who they are. I've never heard of the serpents before this. Why would they come after me? Jack's eyes softened, and for a moment, his usual hard edge faltered. I don't have all the answers, but I will find out. This isn't your fault. They've targeted you, but we're going to figure out why and stop it. Maya nodded, but the uncertainty still gnawed at her. She had no idea what the next step was, what they were going to do. But she couldn't let herself give in to the fear. She had to keep going, for herself, and for the people she loved. Jack stood up and walked toward the window, his silhouette outlined by the city lights. He stared out for a long time, lost in thought, before he finally spoke again. I'll contact a few people I trust. Maybe they can help us find some answers. Maya's heart raced. Who could he possibly contact? How could anyone help them now? But she didn't question him. She trusted Jack, and that was the only thing that mattered right now. She couldn't afford to doubt him. She had no other choice but to follow him. You think they'll help? Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack turned back to her, his face serious but filled with a quiet confidence. They owe me, he said. Maya didn't ask who they were. It didn't matter. All that mattered was finding a way out of this. She needed answers. She needed to know what the serpents wanted. And more than anything, she needed to feel like she had some control over her own life again. The door creaked open again, and Jack stepped outside, closing it softly behind him. Maya sat there in the silence, her mind racing. She had so many questions, so many things she didn't understand. But she had to trust Jack. She had to trust that they would get through this. A few minutes later, the sound of a phone ringing broke the silence. Maya's heart skipped a beat as she looked toward the door, hoping it was Jack returning with some news. But the phone stopped ringing before she could get up to answer it. The stillness returned, but Maya felt something stir inside her. She wasn't sure what it was, but it was something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could escape this. Maybe, just maybe, they could fight back. Hours passed, and the silence in the small room felt heavier than ever. Maya sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. The events of the past few days had left her drained, emotionally and physically. She was exhausted, her body sore from the constant running, the fear, the uncertainty. But despite the exhaustion, her mind wouldn't rest. She kept replaying everything over and over, Jack's determination, the serpent's pursuit, and the promise Jack had made to keep her safe. She didn't know how long they could keep this up. She didn't know how long Jack could protect her before they were found again. It felt like a never-ending cycle. Suddenly, she heard the soft sound of footsteps outside the door. Jack! She stood up, heart racing, and walked over to the door, opening it slightly. Jack was standing there, his expression serious, his eyes tired but focused. We need to go, he said, his voice low and urgent. Maya's heart skipped a beat. What's going on? She asked, fear creeping into her voice. Jack's eyes darted around, making sure no one was listening. I just got word. The serpents know where we are. They're coming. Maya's stomach sank. She had known it wouldn't be long before they found them, but hearing it from Jack made it all the more real. What do we do now? She whispered, her voice trembling. Jack stepped inside, closing the door behind him. He walked over to the small table, where a map was spread out. We have to move again. We're going to a new safe house, one they don't know about. It's far from here, but we can't risk staying. Not now. Maya nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She had no choice but to trust Jack. He was all she had left. Jack began gathering his things, his movements quick and decisive. Maya felt a wave of gratitude for him, but also fear. This wasn't a life she had ever imagined for herself, and she wasn't sure how much longer she could live like this. "We leave now," Jack said, his voice steady. "Stay close to me. Don't let anyone see you." Maya followed him out the door, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. As they moved through the dimly lit streets, the sounds of the city felt distant, almost like they were in a different world. Maya tried to block out the fear, to focus on the present, but it was hard. Every corner they turned, every step they took, she felt like they were being watched. They reached a narrow alley, and Jack signaled for Maya to stay behind a dumpster. He peered around the corner, his eyes scanning the street. Maya's heart was in her throat. It felt like the serpents could be anywhere. Jack crouched down beside her, his hand gripping hers. "I'm going to create a distraction," he whispered. "You stay here and wait. Don't move unless I say so. Understand?" Maya nodded, her throat tight. She didn't want to be left behind, but she knew Jack was doing this to keep her safe. He moved silently into the shadows, disappearing from sight. Maya sat there, her back pressed against the cold wall, her eyes darting around the alley, watching every movement, every flicker of light. The minutes felt like hours. She couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation. How much longer could they keep running? How much longer before they were caught? Suddenly, the sound of a car engine broke the silence, followed by the screech of tires. Maya's breath caught in her throat as she peeked around the corner. Two black SUVs were speeding down the street, the headlights cutting through the night. Her stomach twisted. The serpents. They were here. Jack had created the distraction, but now Maya had no idea where he was. The vehicle screeched to a halt, and a group of men stepped out. Maya's heart raced as she pressed herself further back into the shadows, hoping they wouldn't see her. She could hear their footsteps getting closer, their voices low and harsh. She had to stay hidden. She had to stay alive. But then, a voice rang out. "She's here somewhere. Find her." Maya's blood ran cold. They were looking for her. They had found her. The men split up, moving down the street, searching for any sign of her. Maya squeezed her eyes shut, willing herself to stay calm. She could hear them getting closer, their footsteps echoing in the alley. She was about to make a run for it when she heard a familiar voice. "Maya!" Jack's voice rang out from behind her. She spun around, her heart leaping in her chest. Jack was standing there, a gun in his hand, his face hard with determination. "Go," he shouted. "Run." Maya didn't hesitate. She ran. Her legs moved faster than they ever had before, her heart pounding as she sprinted down the alley, Jack's footsteps behind her. She didn't look back. She couldn't. The serpents were closing in, but Jack was right behind her, pushing her forward. "This way," Jack said, grabbing her arm and pulling her into another alley. The narrow passageway was dark and tight, but it was their only chance. Maya followed him, trying to keep her breathing steady, her mind racing. They had to keep moving. Jack led her through the maze of alleyways, dodging every turn, every dead end. Maya's legs burned, but she didn't stop. Not yet. Finally, Jack stopped in front of a small door tucked between two buildings. "This is it," he said, out of breath. "Get in." Maya didn't question him. She moved quickly, sliding inside the door as Jack followed behind her. The room was small, dimly lit, but it felt like a sanctuary compared to the chaos outside. Jack slammed the door behind them and locked it. Maya's chest heaved as she tried to catch her breath, but there was no time to relax. The serpents were still out there, still hunting her. Jack turned to her, his face filled with determination. "We're not safe yet, but we have a moment. We need to plan our next move." Maya nodded, her mind racing. She wasn't sure how much longer they could keep running, but she knew one thing for sure. As long as Jack was by her side, she wasn't going to give up. Not yet.